I lied so well for so long that when the truth finally caught up to me, it didn't feel like a revelation. It felt like a betrayal. Not of my family. Of myself. If you had met me a year ago, you would have believed it too. Leroy, the normal one. The reliable son. The guy who dated girls just long enough to keep people from asking questions, but not long enough to get too serious. I had it down to a routine so natural it barely felt like acting anymore. And that was the scary part. Because somewhere along the way, I almost believed it. It wasn't like I woke up one day and decided to pretend. It was slower than that. Quieter. The kind of thing that builds over years, shaped by small comments at dinner tables, side glances from relatives, the way my dad would casually say things like, "When you have a wife someday," like it was already written in stone. You don't question things like that when you're a kid. You just adjust. So I did. By the time I hit college, I had this version of myself that worked. I knew how to talk about girls. I knew how to laugh at the right jokes. I even had a couple of relationships, if you could call them that. Nothing deep. Nothing real. Just enough to keep the image intact. And for a while, it was easy. Until Jimmy. I met him on a random Tuesday that should have meant absolutely nothing. Campus coffee shop. Long line. I was half asleep, scrolling my phone, barely paying attention. Then I heard someone behind me say, "You gonna order or just stand there looking pretty?" I turned around, already annoyed, ready to snap back. And then I saw him. Jimmy. He had this stupid, confident smirk, like he already knew he'd caught me off guard. Dark hair, messy in a way that looked intentional, and eyes that didn't just look at you, they locked in, like they were actually paying attention. Which threw me off more than I'd like to admit. "Pretty?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. He shrugged. "I mean, it's working. Just not for getting coffee." I should have rolled my eyes. I should have ignored him. Instead, I laughed. That was mistake number one. We ended up sitting at the same table, again, not planned. The place was packed, and he just slid into the empty seat across from me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "So, Leroy, right?" he said, glancing at the name on my cup. I frowned. "You just read that." "Yeah, but now it's less weird when I say it." There was something about the way he talked, easy, unfiltered, like he didn't overthink anything. It made me relax. Which was rare for me around new people. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. Nothing serious. Classes, professors, random complaints about campus food. Normal. Completely normal. Except it didn't feel normal. Because I noticed things I wasn't supposed to notice. The way his knee bumped mine under the table and neither of us moved right away. The way he held eye contact just a second too long. The way my chest felt tight for no good reason when he smiled. I told myself it didn't mean anything. That was mistake number two. "Hey," he said as we both stood up to leave. "I'll probably see you around, right?" "Yeah," I replied, a little too quickly. "Yeah, probably." And I meant it. That was the problem. Because after that, he was everywhere. Not in a creepy way, just consistently. Same coffee shop. Same general areas on campus. Like we'd somehow fallen into the same orbit without trying. And every time we'd talk, it became a thing. "Didn't take you for a morning person," he said one day, sliding into the seat across from me again. "I'm not," I muttered. "I just have responsibilities." He smirked. "Sounds fake." I shook my head, but I was smiling. And that's when I should have realized I was slipping. Because Jimmy wasn't like the other people in my life. He didn't fit into the version of me I'd built. He didn't care about it. One afternoon, we were walking across campus, talking about nothing like usual, when he casually said, "You ever feel like you're just playing a role all the time?" I stiffened slightly. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, hands in his pockets. "Like you act a certain way because it's easier." Because people expect it. Not because it's actually you. I let out a small laugh, trying to brush it off. That's just life, isn't it? Maybe, he said, glancing at me. Or maybe it's just fear. That word stuck. Fear. I didn't respond right away, and for once, Jimmy didn't push. He just nodded like he understood something I hadn't said out loud. And that should have been my warning. Because from that moment on, being around him didn't just feel easy anymore. It felt dangerous. Like he was getting too close to something I'd spent years burying. And the worst part? I didn't pull away. I leaned in. Looking back, I think I knew exactly what I was doing. I just refused to call it what it was. Because as long as I didn't name it, I didn't have to deal with it. That became my strategy with Jimmy. Keep things casual. Keep things ambiguous. Keep everything sitting right on that line where it could still be explained away. Friends. That's what I told myself. Even when it started going way past that. We began hanging out outside of campus without ever really discussing it. It just happened. One minute we were grabbing coffee between classes, the next we were texting late at night about random stuff that didn't matter but somehow felt important. Then came the nights. Come over. He texted me one evening. My roommates are out. I'm bored. I stared at my phone longer than I should have. This shouldn't have been a big deal. Guys hang out all the time. There was nothing weird about it. Except it felt weird. Not wrong. Just loaded. Still, I typed back, yeah, give me 20. Mistake number 3. Jimmy's place was small, a little messy, but lived in. It felt like him, effortless, unfiltered. He didn't even bother cleaning up when I walked in. Welcome to luxury, he said, kicking a hoodie off the couch so I could sit. Impressive, I replied, looking around. Really screams stability. He laughed, dropping down next to me. You love it. I didn't answer that. Because the truth was, I kind of did. We put on some random show either of us cared about. It played in the background while we talked over it, arguing about dumb things, interrupting each other, laughing more than we should have. And at some point, without either of us acknowledging it, we got closer. Physically. It started small. Our shoulders touching. Then staying that way. Then his leg pressing against mine, not moving. And I didn't move either. I remember being hyper-aware of everything. His arm brushing mine when he reached for the remote. The heat of him sitting so close. The way my body reacted before my brain could catch up. I should have created space. That's what I'd always done before. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was. That was mistake number 4. Yo, he said at one point, glancing at me. You're quiet. I'm just tired. I lied. He studied me for a second longer than necessary. Liar. I huffed out a small laugh. You always this annoying? Only when people are pretending. There it was again. That word, without him actually saying it. Pretending. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I shrugged it off. You think you've got me all figured out or something? Jimmy leaned back slightly, still close, still watching me. No, he said. But I think you've got yourself figured out. You just don't like the answer. That hit harder than I expected. I looked away first. And for a second things got quiet. Not awkward. Just heavy. Like we were both standing on the edge of something neither of us had fully stepped into yet. Whatever. I muttered, forcing a smirk. You overthink too much. Yeah? He said softly. Then stop giving me things to think about. I swallowed. Because suddenly it didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt like a challenge. And I didn't know what to do with that. So I did what I always did. I deflected. I stood up, stretching like nothing had happened. I should go. Got stuff tomorrow. Jimmy didn't move right away. Then he nodded once. Yeah. Sure. But something had shifted. I could feel it. Even as I grabbed my jacket. Even as I walked to the door. Even as I told myself this was fine. That I was still in control, that nothing had actually changed. Lyra. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. Yeah? I didn't turn around. I didn't want to. There was a small pause before he spoke again. You don't have to keep doing that, you know. My grip tightened slightly. Doing what? Another pause. Then, quieter. Pretending. My chest felt tight again. Too tight. I forced a small laugh, shaking my head. You're reading into things. Am I? He asked. I didn't answer. I just opened the door. Night, Jimmy. And then I left. The walk home felt longer than usual. My head was loud. Too loud. Because for the first time in a long time, the version of myself I'd built felt unstable. Like it was cracking in places I couldn't ignore anymore. And Jimmy? He saw it. That was the real problem. Not what I felt. Not what I was starting to realize. But the fact that someone else could see through it. Because if he could, then how long before everyone else did too? I told myself I needed space. Distance. Time to reset. So for the next few days, I avoided him. Avoiding Jimmy should have been easy. It wasn't like we had the same classes or anything forcing us together. All I had to do was not go to the places I knew he'd be. Change my routine a little. Keep my distance. Simple. At least that's what I told myself. Reality? I noticed his absence everywhere. The coffee shop felt quieter, even though it was just as crowded. I'd catch myself glancing at the door without thinking, like I was expecting him to walk in and throw out some dumb comment. He didn't. And for some reason, that bothered me more than it should have. I told myself it was a good thing. That this was me getting back on track. Back to normal. Back to being Leroy. The version of me that made sense. The one my family understood. The one that didn't feel like it was constantly on the edge of something I couldn't control. So I leaned into it. I went out with a girl from one of my classes, Emily. She was nice. Easy to talk to. Pretty in a way that checked all the boxes I was supposed to care about. Dinner, drinks, the usual. You're kind of hard to read, she said at one point, smiling as she stirred her drink. I chuckled lightly. Is that a bad thing? Not bad, she said. Just feels like you're holding something back. My chest tightened slightly at that. Funny how different people could say the same thing in completely different ways. Jimmy had called it pretending. She called it holding back. Either way, they weren't wrong. I'm just tired, I said, defaulting to the same excuse. Emily studied me for a second, then nodded. Fair enough. She didn't push. Most people didn't. That's why it worked. That's why this version of me worked. After dinner, we walked for a bit. It was nice. Comfortable. Normal. Exactly what I was supposed to want. At one point, she slipped her hand into mine. And I let her. Of course I did. That's what I was supposed to do. Her hand was warm. Soft. Familiar in a way that should have meant something. But all I could think about was how it didn't feel like anything. No spark. No tension. No pull. Just expectation. And for the first time, I couldn't ignore it. Because I knew what it should feel like. I'd felt it before. With Jimmy. That realization hit harder than I expected. So I did what I always did when things got too real. I pushed it down. Ignored it. Played my part. By the end of the night, I kissed her. It was quick. Polite. Exactly what the moment called for. She smiled after, a little shy, a little hopeful. I had a really good time, she said. Yeah, I replied. Me too. Another lie. Mistake number. I'd lost count at that point. The next day, everything caught up to me. I was back at the coffee shop. Back to my adjusted routine. Everything was fine. Normal. Until. Damn. Took you long enough to come back. My stomach dropped before I even turned around. Jimmy. Of course. He was standing there like nothing had happened. Same relaxed posture. Same look in his eyes that made it feel like he was always a step ahead of me. Been busy, I said casually, even though my pulse had already picked up. Yeah? He replied, raising an eyebrow. Or just avoiding me? Straight to it. Of course he would. I shrugged, grabbing my coffee like I wasn't affected. Why would I avoid you? Jimmy stepped a little closer. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But enough that I did. You tell me, he said quietly. For a second, I considered doubling down. Playing it off. Acting like he was overthinking again. But something in his expression stopped me. He wasn't joking. He wasn't pushing for fun. He actually cared. And that made this harder. I've just had stuff going on, I said finally. Not a lie. Just not the truth either. Jimmy held my gaze for a moment longer. Then he nodded. Right. One word. But it carried more than I expected. Like he didn't believe me. But he wasn't going to force it. Which somehow felt worse. We stood there for a second, the tension thick but quiet. Then he glanced at my hand. Specifically, at my wrist. New? He asked. I frowned. What? He nodded toward it. That bracelet. I looked down. Emily had given it to me at the end of our date. I hadn't even thought about it. Yeah, I said. Just something. Jimmy's jaw tightened slightly. Barely noticeable. But I saw it. Cool, he said. It didn't sound like he meant it. You happy? The question caught me off guard. I blinked. What? With whatever you've got going on, he clarified. You happy? Such a simple question. Should have been easy to answer. I opened my mouth. And nothing came out. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't know how to lie fast enough. Jimmy watched me carefully. Waiting. And that's when it hit me. I could keep doing this. Keep pretending. Keep playing the role I'd built for years. But if I did, I'd lose this. Whatever this was between us. And for some reason, that scared me more than anything else. I don't know, I admitted quietly. The words felt foreign coming out of my mouth. Honest. Jimmy's expression shifted slightly. Not surprised. Just softer. Yeah, he said. I figured. And somehow, that felt worse than if he'd been shocked. Because it meant he'd known all along. I don't know why saying, I don't know, felt bigger than anything else I'd ever admitted. Maybe because it cracked something open. And once it was open, I couldn't just seal it back up. Jimmy didn't say anything right away after that. He just nodded, like he'd been waiting for me to get there on my own. Which, honestly, made it worse. Because it meant this wasn't new to him. It was new to me. Come on, he said after a second, jerking his head toward the door. Walk with me. I hesitated. Of course I did. Every instinct I built over the years was screaming at me to keep things controlled, predictable, safe. But nothing about Jimmy had ever felt safe. And yet, I went anyway. We didn't talk at first. Just walked. Across campus, past people I'd barely registered, through paths I'd taken 100 times before that suddenly felt different. Like everything was sharper. More real. You went out with her? Jimmy asked eventually. Straight to it. I exhaled. Yeah. He nodded once. Figured. There was no jealousy in his voice. Which, weirdly, made my chest feel tight again. I'm trying to understand you, he added. I glanced at him. Good luck with that. I don't think it's that complicated, he said. I let out a small, dry laugh. Feels pretty complicated. Jimmy stopped walking. So I stopped too. He turned to face me fully, and there it was again, that look. Focused. Direct. Like he wasn't going to let me slip out of this one. You like her? He asked. I opened my mouth. Paused. Closed it again. Jimmy didn't move. Didn't rush me. Just waited. And the silence stretched long enough that I couldn't fake it anymore. "She's nice," I said finally. "That's not what I asked?" "I know." "Then answer the question." I ran a hand through my hair, frustrated. "Why does it matter?" "Because you're trying to convince yourself of something," he said calmly. "And I want to know if you actually believe it." That hit harder than it should have. Because the answer? I didn't. Not really. "I'm supposed to," I muttered. Jimmy's expression shifted slightly. "Supposed to?" "Yeah," I said, a little sharper than I intended. "That's how this works, right? You meet someone, you date, you build something normal." "Normal," he repeated. I let out a breath. "You know what I mean." "I do," he said. "I just don't think you do." I looked away. Because he was getting too close again. Too accurate. And I hated how easy it was for him to see through me. "You ever stop and ask yourself what you actually want?" he asked. I gave a small, humorless laugh. "That's kind of the problem." Jimmy stepped closer. Not aggressively. Just enough that I couldn't ignore him. "Then stop running from it," he said quietly. "I'm not running." "Lyra." Just my name. But it hit like a warning. I met his eyes again. And there it was. No jokes. No teasing. No smirk. Just honesty. "You are," he said. "And you're getting tired." I swallowed. Because that part? That part was true. I was tired. Tired of thinking before I spoke. Tired of filtering every reaction. Tired of making sure I never slipped. Tired of being someone that made everyone else comfortable. Except me. "I don't know how to stop," I admitted. The words came out quieter this time. Less defensive. More real. Jimmy didn't hesitate. "You start by being honest." I huffed slightly. "That's easy for you to say." "Not really," he replied. "I've just already done it." I frowned. "Done what?" He held my gaze. "Stop pretending." The word landed heavier this time. Because now, I couldn't pretend I didn't understand it. There was a pause. A long one. And I could feel it building again, that pressure in my chest, that moment where everything could either shift or snap back into place. "You ever think," I said slowly, "that maybe pretending is easier for a reason?" Jimmy tilted his head slightly. "Yeah." I blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah? Of course," he said. "It's safer. It keeps things predictable. No one questions you. No one looks at you differently." I nodded, almost relieved he got it. "Exactly. But it also keeps you stuck," he added. And there it was. The part one didn't want to hear. "It keeps you living a life that isn't actually yours." My chest tightened again. Because that's exactly what it felt like. A life that fit, but didn't belong to me. Jimmy took another small step closer. Close enough now that I could feel the shift in the air again. That same tension from before. Only stronger. "You felt it," he said quietly. I didn't ask what he meant. I knew. That night. On his couch. Every moment I tried to ignore. I looked away. Because admitting that out loud? That was a line I wasn't sure I could cross yet. Jimmy didn't push. Not directly. Instead, he said, "You didn't feel that with her." Not a question. A statement. And I didn't argue. Because I couldn't. Silence settled between us again. But this time, it wasn't just heavy. It was fragile. Like we were standing right on the edge of something neither of us could take back. "You're scared," Jimmy said. I let out a quiet breath. "Yeah." "Of what?" I hesitated. "Of what happens if I stop pretending." Jimmy nodded slowly. "That's fair." I frowned slightly. "That's it." "What do you want me to say?" he asked. "That it's easy? That everything magically works out?" I didn't answer. "Because it doesn't," he continued. "It's messy. People don't always react the way you want. Things change. Not exactly comforting. But, he added softer now, you get to actually be yourself. I looked at him. Really looked this time. And for the first time since all of this started, I saw it clearly. He wasn't fearless. He'd just already chosen. And what if I can't? I asked. Jimmy's expression didn't change. Then you keep doing what you're doing, he said. And eventually, you'll convince everyone. A small pause. Accept yourself. That one landed deep. Because I was already there. Neither of us moved for a second. Come over tonight, he said. Simple. Direct. No pressure in his voice. But there was something underneath it. Something unspoken. I hesitated. Of course I did. Because I knew. This wasn't just hanging out anymore. This was a choice. And once I made it, there was no going back to pretending the same way again. Jimmy didn't rush me. Didn't try to convince me. He just waited. Like he had been this whole time. Okay, I said. And the second the word left my mouth, I knew everything was about to change. The second I got home, I almost backed out. Not in a dramatic way. I didn't throw my phone across the room or have some big internal breakdown. It was quieter than that. I just stood there, staring at the message thread. At his name. At the last thing I'd said, okay. It felt heavier now. More real. Because earlier, standing in front of him, it had been easier to say yes. There was momentum. Emotion. The pressure of the moment. Now, it was just me. And the truth I'd been avoiding for years, sitting right in front of me with nowhere to hide. I could still cancel. Make up an excuse. Something came up. Not feeling great. Rain check. Easy. Safe. Familiar. My thumb hovered over my phone. And for a second, I almost did it. Then I remembered something Jimmy said. Eventually, you'll convince everyone. Accept yourself. I exhaled slowly, locked my phone, and grabbed my jacket. The walk to his place felt different this time. Every step felt intentional. Like I was aware of exactly what I was doing. No pretending this was casual. No pretending this was just another night. This was a decision. And I was making it. Whether I fully understood it or not. When I knocked, my heart was beating harder than it should have. The door opened almost immediately. Jimmy. Same as always, and not. Because now I was seeing him differently. Or maybe I was finally letting myself see him at all. You made it, he said, like there had ever been a doubt. I gave a small nod. Yeah. He stepped aside to let me in. No big greeting. No jokes. Just quiet understanding. And somehow, that made everything feel more intense. We ended up in the same spot as before. Same couch. Same setup. But nothing about it felt the same. The TV was on again, some random show either of us was paying attention to. Because the air between us? It was charged. Thicker than before. Like we both knew exactly what this night was, without saying it. So, Jimmy said after a minute, glancing at me. You okay? I let out a small breath. Yeah. He raised an eyebrow. I huffed slightly. Okay, no. Not really. That earned a faint smile from him. Good, he said. That'd be weird if you were totally fine. I shook my head, but I felt some of the tension ease just a little. Just a little. Then it came back. Because silence settled again. And this time, I didn't run from it. I've been thinking about what you said, I admitted. Jimmy leaned back slightly, still facing me. That's dangerous. Yeah, I muttered. Feels like it. What part? The pretending. His expression shifted, more focused now. Yeah? I nodded slowly. I didn't realize how much of my life is built around it. Jimmy didn't interrupt. Didn't try to jump in. He just listened. And for some reason, that made it easier to keep going. It's like everything I do is filtered first, I said. Before I even realize it. How I talk, how I act, what I say, everything runs through this version of me that I'm supposed to be. That sounds exhausting, he said quietly. It is. I let out a breath, running a hand through my hair. And the worst part is, I got so used to it, I stopped questioning it. Jimmy nodded once. That's how it works. I glanced at him. Yeah. I see that now. Another pause. But this one felt different. Less tense. More honest. And now? He asked. I swallowed. Because this was it. The part one couldn't keep dancing around. I don't know what's real anymore, I admitted. The words felt heavier than anything I'd said so far. Jimmy didn't flinch. Start with what you felt, he said. I looked at him. He held my gaze. Didn't look away. Don't overthink it, he added. Just what you felt. My chest tightened. Because I knew exactly what he meant. That night. The couch. Every moment I tried to explain away. I exhaled slowly. I felt it, I said. Quiet. But clear. Jimmy nodded slightly. Yeah, he said. I know. And it scared the hell out of me. That makes sense. I let out a small, shaky laugh. You're way too calm about this. I'm not calm, he said. I'm just not confused. That hit. Because confusion was all I'd been feeling. Must be nice, I muttered. It is, he said simply. No arrogance. No smugness. Just truth. We were closer now. I didn't remember moving. But we were. Close enough that I could feel the heat between us again. That same pull. Only now. I wasn't pretending it wasn't there. You don't have to figure everything out tonight, Jimmy said. I frowned slightly. Feels like I do. You don't, he repeated. You just have to stop lying about what you already know. I held his gaze. My heart was pounding again. But this time, I didn't step back. I know I didn't feel anything with her, I said. Jimmy nodded. I know I felt something here, I added. His eyes didn't leave mine. And I know I've been avoiding what that means. Silence. But it wasn't empty. It was full. Like everything was finally out in the open. Not resolved. But real. Jimmy shifted slightly. Just enough that our knees brushed again. And this time, I didn't freeze. I didn't overthink it. I just let it happen. You gonna run again? He asked quietly. I shook my head. No. And for the first time, I meant it. Another pause. Shorter this time. Because the space between us was already gone. And I could feel it building again. That moment. That line. Only now. I knew exactly where it was. Jimmy's voice was softer now. Then don't. And that was it. No big speech. No pressure. Just permission. So I made a choice. Not a perfect one. Not a fully thought out one. But a real one. I closed the distance. And this time, I didn't pretend it didn't mean anything. The moment it happened, everything went quiet. Not literally. The TV was still playing in the background, some muffled dialogue either of us had been paying attention to all night. But in my head? Silence. Like everything that had been loud, every doubt, every excuse, every version of myself I'd been juggling, just stopped. Because for the first time, I wasn't thinking. I wasn't calculating how this looked. I wasn't asking what this meant for my family, or my future, or the version of me I'd spent years maintaining. I was just there. Present. And real. I pulled back slightly, just enough to breathe. My heart was racing. Not in a panicked way. In a way that felt alive. Jimmy didn't move far. He stayed close, like he always had, But now there was nothing unspoken about it anymore. No guessing. No pretending. You good? He asked quietly. I let out a small breath, almost a laugh. Yeah. Then, after a second, yeah. I am. And that felt strange to say, because I couldn't remember the last time I'd answered that honestly. Jimmy studied my face for a moment, like he was making sure I meant it. Then he nodded. Okay. Simple. But it grounded me. I leaned back into the couch, running a hand through my hair. Wow, I muttered. Jimmy smirked slightly. That your big reaction? I let out a breath, shaking my head. I don't even know what my reaction is. There. I glanced at him. You're really just calm about all this? He shrugged. Not calm. Just not surprised. Yeah, you said that. Because I've been seeing it. He added. You just finally stopped fighting it. I looked down at my hands for a second. He wasn't wrong. That's exactly what it felt like. Not like something new had started, but like something I'd been holding back finally got through. What does this mean? I asked. The question slipped out before I could stop it. Jimmy didn't answer right away. And for a second, I thought maybe I'd ruined the moment by jumping ahead. But then he said, It means you were honest. I frowned slightly. That's it. For now? Yeah. I let out a small huff. Feels like it should mean more than that. It will, he said. Just not all at once. That made sense. Even if part of me wanted a clearer answer. Something solid. Defined. But that had kind of been my problem, hadn't it? Trying to define everything before I even let myself feel it. I glanced at him again. So what about you? I asked. What about me? You've just been waiting for this. He smirked faintly. Something like that. I shook my head. You're insane. Probably. But there was something softer underneath it. Something real. And I realized. He hadn't pushed me into this. He hadn't forced anything. He just stayed. Consistent. Patient. Letting me get there on my own. That thing you said earlier? I started. About pretending. Jimmy nodded slightly. Yeah? I meant it, I said. I really did almost believe it. He didn't look surprised. That's how it works, he said. You do something long enough, it starts to feel real. I exhaled slowly. Yeah. A pause. Then, I don't think I can go back to that now. The words came out before I could second guess them. And once they were out, they felt true. Jimmy held my gaze. No, he said. You probably can't. There was no judgment in it. No pressure. Just acknowledgement. But I don't know what happens next, I admitted. Yeah, he said. That part's messy. I huffed slightly. Great. He smiled a little. You'll figure it out. Not very reassuring. It's not supposed to be, he said. It's just real. We sat there for a while after that. Not talking much. Just existing in it. And for once, I didn't feel like I needed to fill the silence. Didn't feel like I had to perform. I could just be there. With him. As myself. Eventually, I stood up. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I knew I had to. Not physically. Mentally. I had a lot to process. A lot to figure out. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running from it. Jimmy stood too, walking me to the door like it was the most normal thing in the world. Which, somehow, made it feel less overwhelming. Hey, he said before I left. I looked at him. Yeah? He hesitated for just a second. Don't disappear again. Not a demand. Not a threat. Just honest. I nodded. I won't. And this time, I meant that too. The walk home felt different again. But not heavy like before. Not loud. Clear. Like something had finally settled. Not everything, but enough. Because I wasn't questioning what I felt anymore. I wasn't trying to twist it into something that made other people comfortable. For the first time, I was actually listening to myself. And yeah, it was scary. It still was. But it also felt right. I'd spent years pretending to be someone I thought I had to be. And somewhere along the way, I almost believed it. But now I knew the difference. And there was no going back to not knowing. The next morning, reality hit a little harder. Not in a regret kind of way. More like, oh, this is real now. I woke up earlier than usual, staring at my ceiling, replaying everything from the night before. Not obsessively, just processing it. And for once, I wasn't trying to rewrite it. I wasn't looking for ways to explain it away. It just was. And I had to figure out what to do with that. The first real test came faster than I expected. Family group chat. It sounds stupid, but that's where it always started. Little things. Questions. Expectations wrapped in casual conversation. My mom had sent something about a family dinner coming up. You bringing that girl you mentioned? I stared at the message. That girl. Emily. The version of my life they understood. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Because this was the line. Not a dramatic one. Not some big coming out speech. Just a choice. Do I keep the story going? Or do I start letting it fall apart? I could have lied. It would have been so easy. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Keep things vague. Buy myself time. That's what I always did. But now it felt different. Heavier. Because I knew what I was doing. I knew what I'd be choosing. And for the first time, I didn't want to choose that anymore. No, I don't think so. I hit send before I could overthink it. It wasn't a full truth. But it wasn't a lie either. And weirdly, that felt like progress. Jimmy texted me a little later. You alive? I smirked slightly. Barely. Dramatic. You started it. You good? I looked at the message for a second. And instead of deflecting, yeah. Just thinking. That's new. I rolled my eyes, but I could feel the tension easing again. Shut up. Make me. I shook my head, smiling despite myself. God, he was annoying. We met up later that day. Same place. Coffee shop. Full circle. But this time, it felt different. Not because anything big had changed externally, but because I had. I wasn't watching myself the way I used to. I wasn't filtering every move. I just sat down, across from him, and let it be what it was. So, Jimmy said, leaning back slightly, you look less like you're about to spiral. Give it time, I replied. He smirked. Fair. My mom asked about Emily. Jimmy's expression didn't change much. What did you say? That I'm not bringing her. He nodded once. That a big step for you? Yeah, I admitted. Smaller than it probably should be. But yeah? He studied me for a second. Then smiled, just slightly. Still counts. We talked for a while after that. Normal stuff. But underneath it, there was something steady now. Not confusing. Not tense. Just real. At one point I caught myself. Mid-conversation. Laughing. Relaxed. Not thinking about how I sounded or what it looked like. Just being there. And it hit me. This is what I'd been missing. Not just him. But this feeling. Of not constantly performing. Of not editing myself before I even existed in a moment. You're doing it again, Jimmy said. I blinked. What? Thinking too much. I huffed. I hate that you can tell. Yeah, he said. I know. I shook my head. I don't think I can go back, I said. Not dramatic. Just honest. Jimmy nodded. I told you. Yeah, I said. You did. I'm not ready to tell everyone or deal with all that yet. You don't have to, he said. I looked at him. Really? Yeah, he replied. This isn't about them. Not yet. It's about you not lying to yourself anymore. That made sense. More than anything else had. And that's when it finally clicked. This wasn't some overnight transformation. I wasn't suddenly a completely different person. I wasn't done figuring things out. But I had crossed something. A line I couldn't uncross. And didn't want to. I almost believed it, I said quietly. Jimmy tilted his head. What? That I was straight, I admitted. That all of it was real. He didn't laugh. Didn't make it a joke. He just nodded. Yeah, he said. I know. I exhaled slowly. But I didn't, I added. And that? That felt like the most honest thing I'd said in a long time. We didn't define anything that day. Didn't label it. Didn't rush into some perfect ending. Because real life doesn't work like that. But as we sat there, talking, existing, not pretending, I realized something. I didn't need everything figured out. Not yet. I just needed to stop lying about who I was. And for the first time, I finally had.